Welcome back. I'm very excited to share this with you today. This is something very near and dear to my heart. First of all, it comes out of the teachings of my guru Ashok Singh and what he taught me about the chakras and as it relates to the Bhagavad Gita. And second of all, it sprang forth very spontaneously as I was training other yogis to get this understanding. And as I was talking about the second chakra, I said, you know, it's really like the Cookie Monster in your story. And if you don't get anything else, that's really the heart of what I have to say about the chakras today. The second chakra, you could so easily see it as the Cookie Monster in your life. But first, we're going to tie this into mainstream psychology so it all fits together. There's no gap, and we can talk about this very easily, and then we'll go all the way back to the Bhagavad Gita, and then we'll learn the Sesame Street system that came spontaneously from my teaching to other yogis. So let's get into it. Ashok Singh told me that each of the chakras has its own personality. In the Bhagavad Gita, we have the 5 Pandava brothers, and they have been banished, right? And they're coming back to reclaim their kingdom. And that's a story of meditation. We are coming back to the brain to reclaim our kingdom. So there are 5 Pandava brothers, and there's 1 Krishna, for a total of 6. Which is exactly in line with Kriya Yoga, because Kriya Yoga uses 6 chakras to om through, and then it expands through the brain, through the lotus at the top of the head. So that's what Ashok Ji taught me, and I thought that was so brilliant. I never heard that from anybody else, that each of the chakras has its own personality. It's a very distinct idea. And he was the only one to share that. I never read that anywhere else, that it has its own distinct personality. Very important. Now, I've heard before that different chakras have different jobs to do. And that's another way to really deeply understand what the chakras are doing. They are doing different jobs, and so they're going to express a little bit different personalities. And so we may find sometimes in our lives that we're in a bit of a tug of war between one chakra and another. So between fear and love, between hunger and our big ideas. There's a little tug and war back and forth. So Freud totally saw this, and he said that you have an id, which is this unconscious drive, very much like a Cookie Monster. And then second of all, you have this ego in the middle, which is kind of the arbitrator, right? So we could associate that with the 3rd chakra. And then you have this higher ideal super ego. And so he's got a 1, 2, 3, doesn't he? Then Jung came along and he says, well, let's label these a little more clearly. We have a subconscious mind, a conscious mind, and a superconscious mind, right? And because we're yogis and we practice yoga, we know that all of this lies along the spine, that the brain projects all of this down into the different chakras, and we can experience it in the body. So when we have fear, we feel it in the gut. When we have love, we feel it in the heart. Everybody knows this. It's experiential, and that's very much at the heart of yoga. It is experiential. Now, long before Freud and Jung, there was the Kahuna, who also recognized this tug of war that was taking place in the psychology. And they said it very interestingly. They said, you have 3 spirits in one vessel. You are the jar, and there are 3 spirits inside of you. So you have the unconscious spirit, the conscious spirit, and the higher self spirit, which is often represented at the top of the totem pole with wings, representing this is the higher self. It sees quite far versus the subconscious and the conscious mind. It's very big and broad-minded. So now we have from the Kahuna this idea that not only are these processes of the one self, as Freud and Jung were describing, but you could also see these as different entities, different spirits inside of you that are operating not always in perfect harmony. You know, you say to yourself, I think I'm out of line. Well, it's very easy to see how one of these processes can be at odds with another because of its past, because of what it's programmed to do. And if that's the case inside of us, if we are misaligned between our conscious mind, our subconscious mind, and the higher self, we're going to have misaligned results because of that. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And that's what all of these people are trying to do. They're trying to make sense out of our day-to-day life and the conflicts that we might feel within ourselves, and how to begin to align some of these things. So now we've got 3 spirits in 1 jar, but the yogis, of course, took this twice as far, and they said, no, you don't have 3 spirits, you've actually got 6 spirits operating inside of 1 jar. And so you have the 5 Pandava brothers and the very wise Krishna, who is deep in the brain. Krishna is in heaven, right? We don't breathe through the brain, right? We only breathe through the chakras because they're actually in the war. The battlefield of the body is what they're in. Krishna does not operate in the war. He only gives advice. Isn't that fascinating? So this idea that I've told you from my lineage, which has been handed down orally, not to breathe through the brain, there's a hint of this in the Bhagavad Gita, in that Krishna does not participate in the war directly. He only gives advice to the lower chakras that then operate in the field of battle, which is the body. This is the battlefield right here. So I'm teaching this to other yogis, and I'm trying to describe the 2nd chakra in an easy, fun way that will be easily absorbed, because we can go into the Bhagavad Gita, but it might take us quite a long time to feel kinship with some of those ideas. But Sesame Street was readily available, and I said, oh my God, the 2nd chakra, you know, it's very much like Cookie Monster. You know, he's got to have the cookie. He's just got to have the cookie. And isn't that how we feel about the sensuality of eating or reproducing? We get that urge, and it's like, oh my God, I just got to have it, right? I got to have the chocolate. So that's the 2nd chakra, and that was the beginning of the Sesame Street chakra system. Now from there, it's very easy to picture Oscar the Grouch as the 1st chakra. He lives in a trash can. He goes way down below, and he's got all kinds of possessions down there. We don't even know what he's going to bring out of his can. But he goes down there and he rummages around and he finds all kinds of crazy things. And that's very much the 1st chakra. Attachment to possessions, attachment to earth, attachment to physical things. Cookie Monster would be the Cookie Monster of sensuality in the 2nd chakra. And he expresses those very deep programs of continuing the species and continuing your old life through sustenance, through drinking and through eating. Now the 3rd chakra, you could say that all of the Muppets are the 3rd chakra. The 3rd chakra is really the hero's journey. Because here, this is the one that Krishna spoke to. He spoke directly to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. And it's very strange when you see that, because the oldest brother was not spoken to by Krishna. No, he skipped all the way down to the 3rd chakra and spoke directly to Arjuna. Now, why was that? Because the 3rd chakra is the hero's journey, all right? That is where we choose. Are we going to go up into love, or are we going to go down into fear? That is the borderline. Will we choose love, expansion, going forth into adventure fearlessly, or will we curl up, go back home into fear? That is the adventure. That's the hero's journey. That's the beginning of it. And that's why Krishna talks to the third chakra, Arjuna, in the Bhagavad Gita. So who would be our explorer, our hero in the Muppets? Well, it would have to be Kermit the Frog. He is ambitious. He's setting forth. In every Muppets movie, he is setting forth into the adventure, into something new, creating something new out of nothing. And that's really the hero's spirit, to go forth and conquer and expand. And so you could say that the third chakra is the entrepreneur inside of us. It is the one that goes out and hunts for the family. Whatever the family needs, it goes and gathers that. And you can really see how, because it's the hero's journey, in all of the Muppet movies, he always has that time. I'm up against the wall. I'm almost defeated. I could just accept my defeat and walk away, but he doesn't. He continues to go forth. He continues to expand. He continues to try. And that's really the heart of the third chakra. I'm going to continue to try. In one form or another, I'm going to keep going forth. I'm going to keep trying one way or another. And then we get finally up into the heart. The Pandava of the heart is described as huge. He's a huge Pandava brother. He's just absolutely overpowering. And that is love. That is the heart. And in our Sesame Street system, it is Big Bird, of course, who is so open and kind and huge and full of love and full of kinship with everybody on Sesame Street. The heart can also be hurt. And often Big Bird is hurt by one misunderstanding or another. So it's very fitting to have Big Bird representing the heart. Finally, we get into the throat. And this is really the area of our wisdom and our inspiration, where divine ideals begin to hit the road of the body and be expressed. And so we have an expression of wisdom and understanding. And it's not a hypothesis or something way out in the air which is impractical, but rather it's the wisdom that hits the road and works well. It's the wisdom that we accumulate by bringing our ideals down into the world and they are expressed. And so we have in this chakra the very wise Pandava brother. And in Sesame Street, we can see that all of the humans are constantly explaining wisdom to all of the lower monsters. So all of the lower monsters are very childlike and kid-like, and they're trying to figure out what is life all about. How does this work? How does that work? This happened and I don't understand this. And the humans are very patient and very kind and always explaining how and why higher ideals will fit our life the best. They will bring the greatest success, the greatest love, the greatest joy, the greatest freedom, the greatest kinship between our friends, inspiring them in a direction of wisdom. And that's the throat. That's the throat chakra. Inspiration and wisdom. Finally, we get to the medulla, we get to Krishna, we get to this strange and otherworldly advice that comes from nowhere. And when you've had a download experience, you have had a taste of that. And when the yogis talk about sitting at the feet of the Guru, this is the internal expression of that. That we roll up the spine and we sit in the medulla. And that's where Ashokji told me, that's where we Google God. Isn't that beautiful? And I call it the download experience. You sit at the feet of the medulla, the internal Guru, and you get a download. And the things that you could not possibly understand, suddenly they align. And there's a deep knowing. There's an inspiration and a knowing coming together. And so you see this progression, right? Through inspiration into deep knowing. And that's the download experience. And in the Sesame Street, chakra progression, it is the Snuffleupagus, the very mystical and not always seen Snuffleupagus. In fact, the only one that truly believes in Snuffleupagus just happens to be the heart. It happens to be Big Bird that really knows that Snuffleupagus is there, even though nobody sees him. So in his heart of hearts, he knows that is true. And that's that mystical Snuffleupagus who can have this otherworldly kind of knowing and understanding, which is not a worldly knowing or understanding. It can certainly fit things together that are happening in the world, but it's beyond that. It's a very profound and deep knowing. Often very simple, but the repercussions in your life are often astoundingly profound. Even when it's a very small shift, it just can be a very small little knowing, but that knowing can impact every area of your life and transform it. So we have Krishna and Snuffleupagus, and I thought it was so cool. I found this picture of Sesame Street, and here we see at the top, of course, Snuffleupagus, and just about right, Big Bird in the center, and all of the lower monsters down below. Okay, great. Now we have the Sesame Street chakra progression. Forrest, what do I do with all of this? Well, it's a very fun way to negotiate with yourself inside of yourself. Okay, here's Big Bird from the heart. Here's the Cookie Monster from the second chakra. Here's Kermit the Frog, the hero, the one that wants to go forth. And here's the wisdom of Mr. Cooper. And here is the sage advice of Mr. Snuffleupagus. And all of these are coming together, and I have to combine and pick and choose and find my way through my life as all of these forces come together. And you know what? Sometimes I'm gonna have to give that Cookie Monster a cookie, or he's gonna go crazy, of course. And so he's a part of me. I'm going to value him. I'm going to recognize him. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna give you a cookie today, but I might not give you a cookie tomorrow. Is that gonna be okay with you? Ah, I can bargain like that. Sure, says Cookie Monster. Yeah, sure. Okay, that sounds bearable. And now we have a working relationship with these different forces which are operating. If we put a label and we put a name on them and we begin to create understanding with them, we have a working relationship now rather than a completely unconscious relationship where we're just trying to stuff down the monsters and claw our way to the top. But sometimes we miss the hero, and we miss the Big Bird, and we miss the Cookie Monster. And all of these guys are one big happy family inside of us. And so we need to feed the heart, and we need to feed Cookie Monster now and then. And that was the sage advice of Lahiri Mahashaya. He said, hey guys, if you haven't looked around, the yogi householder just happens to be the very perfect setting for yogic success. You're not going to find it in the ashram. You're not going to find it up in the mountains, because there's bugs in the mountains, and there's heat in the mountains, and there's cold in the mountains. So what if instead you are a self-sufficient yogi householder, and you feed the different systems inside of you, right? You feed the family, you balance the family, and then you hide away home, and you roll up the consciousness through the family, up into the brain. You sit at the feet of Krishna, or the Snuffleupagus. You get that sage knowing. You get that inspiration and sage knowing coming through you. And suddenly your life becomes clear. Your life path becomes clear. A moment of distress becomes clear and easy to you, because you're sitting at the feet of the true guru who is always inside. Ashokji told me, he said, my one job is to introduce you to the true guru. And I thought, that was the first day I met him. And I was so enchanted with him for having that perspective, not sitting up on a pedestal like so many other yogic gurus. He was just, this is my job. This is what I want to do for you. And it was so clean, and it was so pure, and so easy. So that's the true guru. Inside, in the medulla, you sit at the feet and you know. You garner that knowing. That sitting at the feet, that's an internal process, right? And so that's the joy of cleaning out the chakras, cleaning out some of the residual garbage that accumulates in the chakras very naturally as we walk through life. The countertop is going to get dusty. We probably want to wipe it clean, right? Same thing with the chakras. That allows and helps us to disconnect when we treat them fairly. If we treat the chakras unfairly, it'll be much harder to disconnect. But when we treat them fairly, as a family, as a valued member, then they clean out more easily, we disconnect more easily, and we roll up into the brain and sit at the feet of the true guru, and we know. We get that download experience, and then eventually we keep going up and we expand. That's the lotus on the top of the head. What does a lotus do? It opens, it expands. That's expansion. That's the expansion of consciousness that takes place after we have rolled up through the family of Sesame Street. This idea that I'm presenting to you of the consciousness rolling up is a little bit different than just pure Kundalini. So you hear Kundalini goes up, Kundalini goes up, Kundalini goes up. Yes, it does. But more importantly, much more importantly, the consciousness rolls up. So if you haven't heard this before, you might want to check out the Big Bliss training, because I demonstrated on the camera. You see the roll-up taking place in my yogi friend as we go through it. So I hope you find this fun and interesting. I hope you're walking through your life and you're like, oh my God, that's Cookie Monster. Oh my God, that's Big Bird. I hope you go through it and it's fun and interesting, and it's an easy way to relate to the chakras and understand that we have a Cookie Monster and we have a Big Bird and we have a Snuffleupagus hidden inside of us waiting to express. And if we can all come into balance, come into alignment, clean ourselves out, let things go, let the past go, let the negative emotions and limiting decisions go, then everything will begin to align, and it's easier and easier to roll up into the medulla. So I hope you walk through your life and you see a little bit of that. I hope you loved this. If you did, be sure to hit that bell down below so I can see all of you next time.